Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. This podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, some other places, as well as my website, AnnetteTalks.com, and YouTube. And I would highly encourage you to go to YouTube and subscribe, and you can see both the video or just get the audio there as well. And today I am joined by John Ziegler. Hi, John.
Hi, Annette.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
And I always like to pull your little intro from your Facebook page because I enjoy it. It says, this is your description of yourself. A highly opinionated contrarian who has disdain for the news media and is right far more than they are. And I like that. And you are also a senior columnist for Mediaite, and you have a podcast, it's called Individual One, right? The number one.
Correct.
That can be found at freespeechbroadcasting.com.
Correct. I also have another podcast called The World According to Zig, which is on hiatus as we do a totally different podcast we're in production for, but you can find all that at freespeechbroadcasting.com. Wow.
So you're going to have three when you get the other one going?
Maybe. I mean, or zero. It all depends on how things go down. But we're in production on a very, very large scale, almost documentary like podcast that hopefully, I don't know, if this coronavirus thing ever ends, people might see the light of day.
Yeah, if it ever ends. So that's a nice segue into our topic. I wanted to talk about the stay-at-home orders, and specifically in California, because that's where you live. And I noticed on Facebook not long ago that it looked like you'd gotten recruited to sort of lead a movement. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I saw some pictures of you doing some protests in Ventura. Are you in Ventura County? Is that where you live? Or?
Correct. Just north of Los Angeles.
All right. That used to be my stomping ground a long time ago. So I still have a warm place in my heart for California, but it's stuff like this, although it's not terribly different than other states, but they sure jumped on the bandwagon quickly, didn't they?
Well, it's just to back up as far as my involvement here. I mean, I am, I guess, the spokesperson for a group called Citizens for a Free Ventura County. And we've been running ads in local papers criticizing the medical officer who is essentially been a one-person tyrant in our state for the last couple of months. He's not our state, our county. Our county is being literally run detail by detail by an unelected medical officer by the name of Dr. Robert Levin, who has been completely and totally wrong about everything. He predicted well after Governor Newsom's shutdown that we would have 400 to 600 hospitalizations a day. A day. That scared the heck out of a lot of people. I mean, that's
in the county, just in the county,
in the county of 850,000 people. He predicted after the shutdown. So this is not no mitigation. That whole line of reasoning. He originally said 400 to 600, and that would essentially make us very much like New York City if you control for population. And here we are now, about 50 days after the shutdown, and we have I think as of last count, we have a total in that 50 days of 111 people who have gone to the hospital for the coronavirus. Wow. Now, and we have, I think, 8 hospitals in our county. So it's actually about, give or take, 2 hospitalizations a day for 8 hospitals. I mean, it's just, it's nuts. I mean,
so math is not my strong suit, but 111 seems a little bit less than 400 to 600 a day for the last 50 days.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's nuts. And look, I mean, I'll even give him some benefit of the doubt that maybe social distancing and mitigation reduce that number. Interestingly, just to show you, and this is so consistent with what we're seeing with the way the media is totally invested in this narrative, he changed his mind soon after he made the 400 to 600 prediction, and he changed it to 200 to 400.
Mm-hmm.
And when you actually Google that, Dr. Levin and 200 to 400, you will find an article in the Ventura County Star, the only major newspaper we have in the county, where the article admits that the article has been updated to reflect the new projection, but doesn't tell you what the old projection was. So it makes it sound as if this was Dr. Levin's first projection, which is still way off. I mean, but it's less way off than the original. And look, people make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I did not think we were going to have as many deaths nationwide as we currently do. I never thought that 2 million was even remotely a possibility. I did not believe that the 240,000 number nationwide that Dr. Fauci at one point was signing off on was possible. Although, and I hate even going down this road, but, the way we're counting the deaths now, I think has everybody a bit uneasy. I mean, those that are in favor of the shutdown are claiming that there's a massive undercount, which I find ludicrous. And people who are against the shutdown are saying, well, wait a minute, some of these numbers don't totally make sense. And there is an incentive for certain entities to claim that a death was because of coronavirus, including a hospital that gets money for it. And so I don't know what the answer on that is. I mean, I am an ardent anti-conspiracy person. I hate conspiracy theories. And this is real. This whole thing is absolutely real. It's not a hoax. It's worse than the flu. I get all that. But in certain areas of the country, including Ventura County, California, this is really no different right now than the flu. I mean, our 111 hospitalizations in about 50 days. We've had, I think, 19 deaths. All of our deaths have been older people with underlying conditions, except one, and this gets people suspicious about the numbers. One of our deaths in this county, one of our 19, was a 37-year-old man. Now that sounds really scary until you learn that the 37-year-old man died of a drug overdose, and he happened to have the coronavirus, and that counts. They counted it, and that counts as one of the coronavirus. And that's not me making something up or exaggerating. That is the county is essentially fully admitted to that. And so, a rational person has to go, well, wait a minute, hold on. If this is happening in a county that's hardly having any problems at all, where we're, every death is a big deal. In New York City, where, unfortunately, they're literally piling up the deaths, how good can the accounting really be? And I am not suggesting some sort of, massive overaccount where obviously people are dying, and they're clearly dying because of the coronavirus in New York City and in the surrounding areas. But I guess I'm most offended. I'm offended by a lot of things here, but one of the things I'm most offended by is the idea that we're all being treated like New York City, that we could all be New York City. And there's no way we're ever going to be New York City here in Ventura County. And I've been appearing on local radio, and as I mentioned, putting ads in the local papers. Here I'm no medical expert, but for now over a month, I've been saying that Dr. Levin was wrong. And I was right, and he was flat wrong. Yet very, very few people seem to want to make any conclusions based upon that. Not that you should believe me, believe common sense, believe the data, believe logic, and believe a narrative. And let me explain real quick, and this is a long answer to your very short question, but let me explain real shortly why I always had skepticism about California. And I think this is really important. I wrote a column about this in Mediaite earlier this week, because I think it explains nationwide why I think we might be really handling all this very wrong and under some very false presumptions. One of the things that always bothered me about California and vis-a-vis New York was the idea that New York would explode well before California. Now, just from a basic common sense logic perspective, that made no sense to me at all. Because as you know, having lived here, especially in Southern California, especially in San Francisco, this state has incredibly strong connections to China. We have a
Yes.
very strong Chinese population, a lot of immigration from China. Just look at a damn map. I mean, we are the first place anyone from China is going to stop in America. It's not going to be New York now. And long story short, is I believe very strongly, and the science backs me up on this, that there are two different strains of this, at least two, that are impacting different parts of the country. We on the West Coast have apparently this Chinese strain, and in New York City, not surprising, by the way, given the the European nature of the population there, that they have a European strain. I mean, I realize we were living in this world where, well, if you don't have this fancy medical degree, no one wants to listen to you. But does it take a fancy medical degree to say, well, let's see, what city in America has the strongest connection to Italy as far as its population? And Italy is exploding. And geographically, the first place anybody from that region of the world would come into America would be, New York. It doesn't take the proverbial rocket scientist to realize, okay, there could be a connection there. And so the first premise that made me go, what, was this idea that somehow California was going to come late when it came to an explosion of cases. And so the narrative here has been, well, we have done so well here in California because Governor Newsom, Gavin Newsom, as I now refer to him, or as my 7-year-old daughter refers to him, Governor Poosum, because she really hates him. She came up with that on her own, by the way. He gets all the credit because he shut us down early and hard and fast on the evening of March 19th, a date I will never forget. He shuts down the whole state. And this is like a day and a half, 2 days before the rest of the country did. And that somehow this 2 or 3 days is the reason that California has done so well and our death rate is so low. And, his prediction he predicted, depending on how you do the math, up to 25 million Californians were going to get this in 8 weeks. That's what Gavin Newsom said when he shut down the state. And I wrote a column saying, that's baloney. And if you weren't running a clean podcast, I would use stronger language than that. And I detailed exactly why that was baloney. And guess what? I was dead right. And he was dead wrong. And of course, his supporters will claim, well, that's because of mitigation. No one's going to claim that mitigation prevented. At this point, I think we would have been on schedule. I haven't looked at the math today, but somewhere in the realm of 13, 14 million cases by now. And we're still in the tens of thousands. No one's claiming mitigation did that. But here's the really important and I think interesting thing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So now we know a lot more about where this thing came from and when it came. And there have been numerous sources. The antibody tests, a 60 Minutes report on a company that tracked flights from Wuhan, China into the United States in late December, from Wuhan into Los Angeles and to San Francisco. There have been anecdotal reports. I don't know if you've felt this, but I live here, obviously. I've had a lot of people who I consider to be credible, who are positive that they had this sometime over the winter, well before the shutdown here in California. And they even had reasons to believe why they would be infected because they knew people who were from mainland China or had come from mainland China. Some of these were people that were associated with colleges, with Chinese immigrants who were attending. So there wasn't like off the wall, craziness and everyone wanting to be part of a big story. And so now let's do some new math, Annette. Let's now that we have new information.
Right. I have to tell you first that I've been saying this for a long time too, because I'm almost positive my oldest daughter and I had it back in January. And I've been saying that for a few months. And every time I post that on Facebook, I have at least 2 or 3 people say, yes, I'm positive I did too. But until I read your article yesterday or the day before, I didn't even put together where it came from. But my daughter's friend is Chinese and they made a trip to China in December. And we had her over a few times. So
right. And that doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove it. But when you get other data points it starts to become rational and it starts to create a different narrative. And so there's no one in the science community now that's arguing that the coronavirus wasn't throughout California, at least by mid-January. At least by mid-January. I mean, that is not even a controversial statement anymore. Okay, so if it was throughout California in mid-January, right? Now we have to reevaluate some things, because now not only did California not shut down early, it actually shut down late. And there's 2 months now. There's 2 full months where California has this virus that is incredibly contagious, that's running throughout the state. No one knows anything about it, or hardly anyone knows anything about it. No one's doing any mitigation. We're living life totally normal. And by the way, we're not just living normal life. Let's think about some of the things that are going on in California from mid-January to mid-March. Disneyland, wide open, jam-packed because of the Star Wars attraction. My family went twice, once in late January on the day Kobe Bryant was killed, and then later in February. It was packed. There were Chinese people wearing masks all over the place. My wife and I were like, what the heck is this? Well, we thought it was ridiculous. But Disneyland should have been a petri dish for this, and yet nothing happens. I mentioned Kobe Bryant. From January 26th through February 24th, tens of thousands of people in Los Angeles in the middle of this are congregating in intimate memorials, hugging each other, standing in close proximity, having no idea about a virus. That's right. This should have been a super spreader of extraordinary proportions. No indication it did anything. The San Francisco 49ers host the NFC Championship game in late January. Santa Clara is one of the places we know for sure, which is right where the stadium is, by the way. We know for sure via antibody tests that a huge portion of the population had this way before the shutdown. No indication that game did anything. The 49ers make the Super Bowl on February 2nd. Tens of thousands of Super Bowl parties, not just here in California, but across the country, of course. But here in California, where we have the virus, again, no indication that it creates any sort of explosion. We have the Grammy Awards in Los Angeles. We have the Oscars after the Super Bowl in mid-February. Nothing happens. So can somebody please explain to me how given our current perception of this thing, how is any of that possible? We should all be dead here in California. I mean, in all seriousness, why is California not worse than New York? We had NBA games, NHL games. We had every possible. We had the LA Marathon on March 8th. They ran a freaking marathon in the middle of Los Angeles on March 8th, at least 2 months after the virus is already here in California. Nothing. Yeah. Nothing happens. All I'm asking is, can somebody give me an explanation for that? And nobody can or will. And instead, I'm treated like some sort of blasphemer because I dare to even ask a question like this.
Yeah, that's too much common sense. That's too much logic. That's one of the things that's been really hard about all of the shutdowns. When California first shut down, I remember that night. Because I remember I read that and my heart just dropped into my stomach. It was like, what? They're doing what? That is not what we do in this country, right? And of course, it wasn't long after that before all the other states started doing the same thing. But then you see, like in Vermont and in one of the counties here, where they're putting little signs up at the store for things that you can't buy because they're non-essential, right? And that was the second time where my gut just said, oh my gosh, this is not what we do in this country. We don't make these decisions for everybody else. And we don't have like the county health department. Yeah, we have Tri-County Health Commission here who's making all our decisions as well. And it's super, super frustrating that it doesn't matter that like my county sounds like your county. We don't have a lot of deaths here. And yet with all the shutdowns, I kind of expected to go outside and see like a bring out your dead kind of thing, like with ambulances. Like when this whole started, I thought with this kind of shutdown, we're going to see ambulances coming through the streets and taking people out of here on a regular basis. And if that was happening, I might be okay, this makes sense. That's never happened. I don't know anyone who's died. I know one lady hospitalized.
Annette, I think that you've hit on really the fundamental problem here. Because we've never done this before, we have no expectations or understanding of what the threshold ought to be, and you and I think, are looking at this from a historical perspective, going, wait, this doesn't reach the standard. As bad as it is, wait, even in New York City, I don't know that this reaches the standard. And let's be very clear, it is way worse in New York than it is around the rest of the country. There are those who have been using that as a way to scare the hell out of everybody else. Governor Cuomo has done that very overtly, claiming that the whole country will be like New York City. As of today, and I've been charting this for a long time on my Twitter feed. Almost every day I put out the numbers, and I think it's important that people understand some proportion and perspective on these numbers. And unfortunately, we've lost all sense of proportion and perspective, and we've never gone through this before. And I don't think people have a good sense, and certainly the media doesn't have a good sense as to what the threshold for shutting down a country ought to be. In my view, it ought to be far greater than what we have, and it should be far more widespread than what we currently have. And we're well into this now. But just to put a statistical point on it, New York City, I believe, is the whole reason for the reason our numbers are completely out of the realm of acceptability right now, and they are impacting not just the New York numbers, but obviously the Northern New Jersey numbers, the Philadelphia numbers, the Connecticut numbers, and the Boston, Massachusetts numbers. All those states are directly connected to New York City via public transportation. I truly believe, and I've read the MIT study, I've talked to the author of the MIT study extensively. He happens to be a doctor here in Los Angeles, which is amazing. The study that indicated that the subway system in New York really was the epicenter of all of this. And if you take those five states I just mentioned, they make up 16% of the U.S. population, but 60% of our deaths right now. Now, that's amazing. 60% of our deaths are from the greater New York City area. You might be a percentage point or two less than that if you discount like Pittsburgh and upstate New York and whatever. But it's well over 50% come from the greater New York City area, depending on how you define it. And I define it by where the tentacles of the public transportation system of New York City go. And I grew up in the Northeast. My father worked in New York City. I'm very familiar with the whole. I've lived in Boston. I've lived in Philadelphia. I mean, I know this area of the country exceedingly well. So I'm not just talking in theory about how the public transportation system works. So I really think, back to your point, I think that we have just created a standard here that is not just absurd, but it's incredibly dangerous for the future. I mean, if we're going to shut down over something like this, that it's terrible, it's bad, it's way worse than a normal flu. It could end up being way, way worse than a normal flu, but it is not, in my opinion, based upon what we've currently seen, a situation where it would bring our society to its knees if we handled this in a less extreme way. I just don't believe that. I mean, one of the many facts they don't want to tell you, Annette, and trust me, I've tried to find this stat, and you cannot do it in the United States. You can only come up with a guesstimate. But isn't it amazing that we don't know the average age of the persons who have died in America because of this? We do not have that stat. And the reason why we don't have that stat, in my opinion, is because that stat is startling. Because the best I can figure is it's at least 78 or 79. It might be 80, 81. It's 82 in Massachusetts. It's 80 in Ohio. Those are the median ages. And I think median is actually a better gauge here than average. But depending on whether you use average or median, it's somewhere in the ballpark of 80 years old. And that's well past life expectancy. I'm sorry. People, you're not allowed to say that. It sounds cold, but I'm sorry. That is not the same thing as if children were being targeted or young, healthy adults are being targeted. That's just not the same thing. And some people, especially on the left, although David Muir even did this in his interview with Donald Trump, of course, he is probably on the left, for ABC, have been referencing the idea that we have more deaths of coronavirus than we lost lives during the Vietnam War. I'm thinking, you cannot be this dumb. Nobody can possibly be this dumb to make that comparison. That is not apples to oranges. That is apples to orangutans. There is by the way, it would be that way even if we didn't have an average of somewhere around 80 years old for people who were dying here. It is just fundamentally different. I mean, I don't know if you're a sports fan or not, but I got into a tiff with a sports reporter about this issue, and I asked him, okay, so you don't think age matters? Don Shula, legendary football coach of the Miami Dolphins, just died at the age of 90. He's won more football games than anyone in the history of the National Football League. Compare the news media, the sports news media's reaction to his death at 90 to Kobe Bryant's death at 42. Right. Please compare the reaction. There's a reason why. Now, granted, Kobe died with other people, and they were all young and healthy, and that absolutely impacted it. But purely on those two people, which did they consider to be the much, 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 much bigger story? Right. Obviously, Kobe Bryant. Mm-hmm. And no one needed to explain why, because Kobe still had another 45 years to live. Don Shula was lucky to have lived to 90. I mean, it's just amazing to me that we just kind of we've suspended all reality in order to, I believe a lot of this is to be able to conform to a narrative that now everyone is invested in. I've seen many stories in my life, in my career, where the most dangerous thing in the world that happens is when leaders and media members and even members of the public become deeply emotionally invested in a narrative, because then they put on the blinders. No other facts matter. And that's what happened in California. That's why I wrote the column. Wait a minute. We've got some new facts here. Let's go back and see whether or not this current narrative still makes any sense. And I strongly believe that it does not. And if the narrative in California doesn't make sense, then it ought to make everybody else question, all right, are the numbers in places where the numbers are okay? Are they okay because of the lockdown? Or are they more likely to be okay because of geography, because of weather, because of population density, because of lack of public transportation, like we have in no public transportation really here in Ventura County in California? I mean, those are the factors that I think are more important than, social distancing or staying inside. I mean, there's another, Governor Cuomo said today, which was just amazing. He was shocked. He was shocked to see that almost everybody going to the hospital these days in New York had actually been people who had stayed inside. Yeah. And okay, well, don't you think you ought to reconsider then that maybe outside is actually safer than inside? I mean, and there's been a big battle here in California over the beaches. I'm actually speaking to you from a beach house. Where I'm looking out at the pool, which is closed, which is insane because it's got chlorine in it, and it's 82 degrees out, and my kids can't go into the pool, and we're barely allowed to go to the beach down the street. We have to keep walking because you're not allowed to sit down when the beach is literally the safest place you could possibly be. Literally, you could not find a safer place. But because I guess it looks like people might be having fun, we can't have that. No. We have to have the fun police out. And literally, there are police guarding the beach. There's probably kids getting the snot beat out of them within blocks of here in lockdown, and no one cares about that. But we got police guarding the beach. We got a medical officer who is openly talking about the state having hired contact investigators. This is the term that he has used. Contact investigators to come to the houses, not just the people who have been infected, people who have been named by other people who have been infected as possible infectees. And then with the ability, no, he didn't mention Dr. Levin didn't mention what uniform these contact investigators are going to be using, whether they'll be brown shirts with a swastika or not. But they will apparently have the authority to take family members out of the house to prevent them from being exposed if they're not being quarantined properly. I mean, if this was a movie, no one would possibly believe it. And he doesn't even seem to understand what he's saying. He thinks he's doing, or at least appears to be thinking that he's doing some sort of good. Again, in a county that has no significant problem. I couldn't find the virus right now if I tried. If you said to me, go find the virus,
Right.
I could not possibly find the virus in the county in which I'm currently residing and what the current situation is. And so we're living in a bizarro world, and not everybody should be treated the same. But I really want to underline that point you made, that the biggest problem is our threshold is all off. I mean, that doesn't mean you don't do anything.
Right.
Somehow we got into this debate where it's either we do nothing or we shut down the whole world and no one goes outside. There is a massive Grand Canyon of options in between there, and I don't know how this. I really believe it was a classic panic, and I really believe that California and Gavin Newsom played a massive role, because when we shut down on March 19th, it scared the living crap out of everybody else. It eliminated any cover that any other governor had, because my gosh, here it comes. New York's going to crap, and California, we're on both ends of the coast. It's going to come after us. We're all doomed. We got to batten down the hatches. And I believe Gavin Newsom did it based upon very bad and no data, no real information, just a whole lot of panic and a desire. I mean, let's face it, for a lot of liberals, this whole scenario is a dream. I mean, it's a dream. They've never dreamed of having this kind of power. And I realize I'm in California, which is very, very liberal, but even across the country, I've been really disappointed and I'm a pessimist by nature, but even surprised by how willing most people are to go along with this. Even people, I mean, I have disdain now for most so-called professional never Trump conservatives, because I think I now believe, I'm a never Trump conservative, but I now think most of my so-called colleagues are complete frauds, and that this really proved it. I mean, when they didn't support Kavanaugh against Christine Ford, I started to suspect it. But now, wait a minute, hold on a second. You're going to say that government shutdowns that destroy our economy over something that's not catastrophic by all accounts. And by the way, you're not just going to be in favor of the shutdown. You're going to condemn, as many of them have, you're going to condemn people standing up for their constitutional rights. You're going to condemn them as bad people, all because you hate Donald Trump that much? Yeah. I'm sorry. You're no conservative. I mean, I hate Trump with a passion. But at this point, the left reaction is so insane here. They almost have me thinking about supporting Donald Trump. That's how. That's how. I mean, I'm being totally serious. I mean, not that my support matters, but that's how crazy nuts the left has gone here. And I actually, I do believe that a lot of it is either consciously or subconsciously motivated by a desire to get rid of Trump. I do not believe that the left would react this way if Hillary Clinton was president. I do not believe that. I mean, it might be subconscious, but I do not believe the left would be reacting that way. I think that there would be people on the left who would be willing to stand up and say, "Hold on a second. Are we really going to do this? We're really going to arrest people, for opening a business or standing on a beach, or really?" I mean, but now you're not allowed to do that on the left, because then you're a Trump supporter. And that dynamic has really been very devastating. And I felt it personally. I mean, I spoke at a rally here in Ventura County, and I had to joke about the fact that I'm not a Trump supporter. And I'm sure people were confused as to how to deal with that. But I actually think Trump has created the worst of both worlds for people like you and me, because we get all of the toxicity and the stench and the negativity that he brings to this issue, because we're perceived as Trump supporters, and therefore we're anti-science, and we just want people to die, and all we care about is the economy. So we get all of that negativity, but we don't even get the extra push of having his support, because he's completely limp, with Fauci leading him around by his nose, and so we get no benefit from him being in the White House, and it's really incredibly frustrating. It's scary, and I have to say, I mean, I don't like to depress people, but I don't see a path. I do not see a path out of this. I really, honestly do not. I see nothing but roadblocks. I think that the media is going to sabotage every state that tries to open up by cherry picking their data. I think they're going to do it to Georgia for sure. They're going to make sure they're going to find everybody who dies in Georgia. Anybody who dies under the age of 60 is going to be a star in Georgia. They're going to have died because of we reopened Georgia. I mean, they are invested in destroying and sabotaging anybody that tries to open up. And I think people will get.
Why do you think that is? Is that purely an anti-Trump thing, or is it just that there's? But that's what I've been trying to figure out on during this whole thing as well. And not just the media and not just the politicians, because they're disgusting enough and they're the ones that have the power, but so many just plain vanilla citizens who seem to have no problem at all with staying home. It's like virtue signaling. I stay at home. I'm saving lives. I'm wearing a mask. I'm saving a life. You don't wear a mask. You're arrogant. I've had this conversation on Facebook, and I had to get out of the Nextdoor app because it's full of so many morons. You know, one of the posts that they did the other day was, oh, you tell one of those arrogant protesters that's not wearing a mask that when they get the coronavirus, they can't go to the doctor because they're so arrogant. And I don't even know where to start with that. And so I just had to get out.
Look, I think it all goes to investment in that narrative. No one likes to be wrong. And because the damage done here was so great, we've lost over 33 million jobs already. Because the damage done was so great, nobody can possibly bear the idea that maybe we made a mistake here. Mm-hmm. That's not possible. And so the media will never, ever, ever, ever admit that. And so now they need to make sure no one defies that narrative. I mean, in their minds, Georgia and other states are there. I mean, that's why they're going after Iowa. That's why they hate Sweden. I mean, these people had the audacity to defy our authority. Mm-hmm. They went against the experts. And if they get away with this, people might start to think, well, wait a minute, maybe there wasn't all that much going on here. And so that cannot happen. And then when you add on top of that, the Trump aspect, where God forbid if Georgia gets away with it and other states get away with it and the economy starts to come back, Trump might get reelected, then, this is a non-starter. And so I am someone who always tries to find hope or silver lining and some sort of path. And I mean, it's really difficult for me to come up with a path to where we survive this as a country. And this is going to sound incredibly trivial, and I've said this in other venues, but I'll continue to say it because I really do believe it. I really believe that the only entity, unless the Supreme Court, which has not helped us a damn bit in this whole business. I mean, one of the things the Trump supporters always tell me is, but the courts. Okay, we needed the courts right now. Where are they? Where is the Supreme Court to help us right now? Nothing. Zero. I mean, apparently there might take a case in Pennsylvania involving the governor there, but we've said no relief from the courts here at all. So I have no hope in the Supreme Court turning this around, and so therefore I believe that the only entity that could, in theory, if they really had the gumption, if they had the courage, which I doubt they will, the only entity that can turn this around is the National Football League. If the National Football League decides, all right, we're going, and let's see what happens, then that gives a permission slip to everybody else in the country to get back. Because if you're having, stadiums of full football games on Sundays, and therefore, by the way, the domino effect of this would be enormous. If the NFL goes, then college football goes, then high school football goes, and schools in general go. I mean, so now you have a huge momentum towards normal life, and we get our nerve back. I mean, we've completely lost our nerve at this point. And so if the National Football League goes, and I don't think they'll go with fans in the preseason, but I think there's a chance they might go with fans in the regular season, assuming that come August things are under control. And if that happens, then I think we've got a shot. However, if they cave, I mean, in all seriousness, if it happens this way, I doubt it will, because I think it'll happen in stages. But if it happens that on one day the National Football League, let's say in August, says we just can't do this, there's not going to be a season this year, take 7,000 or 8,000 off the Dow in one day. I mean, because there is no coming back from that. Because now we're into next spring. Because now we have an entire winter where we are frozen in this situation. Even if they find a vaccine by some miracle, we're done. Stick a fork in us. So that's about the only scenario. And knowing what I know about old men, white old men, which is basically run the National Football League, they're all a bunch of cowards, especially rich white old men. They don't want to lose what they have. So my guess is the NFL will cave and wimp out, and they'll either try to do something really stupid like have a season without fans, or they'll just scrap the whole thing. In which case we're done. It's over.
That's an interesting potential. My thoughts have been more along the lines of we've got summer right around the corner, and homeschool, thank goodness, is going to be over in a few weeks. But you're going to have a whole mass of kids with nowhere to go and nothing to do. And they're going to start hitting the parks, and they're going to start, when I was driving around my neighborhood the other day, I saw little groups gathered out in front of their houses doing their thing. And I was like, oh, illegal, But my hope is that enough people over the summer will say, screw it. I'm tired of this. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go do my thing. I'm going to go, and enough people will say, screw it, and just start doing it. They cannot contain everyone.
I would like to think you're right, and I think there's something to that, but I'm just looking for one lightning strike that would change everything.
Yeah.
The NFL is about the only one that can do that. I'm also, and this is, I mean, there's no way to really phrase this politely or politically in a politically correct fashion, but I really do believe that something has to happen, and it might be a horrible situation captured on video. And I'm not rooting for this. I'm just telling you what would change things. I think that the minority communities have to be engaged here. White people protesting isn't going to do anything here, especially because of Trump. It has to be minorities. And if minorities start to express discontent with this, Democrats will immediately go, oh, whoa. Okay. This is something we have to deal with. So,
well,
I have no way of knowing how to facilitate that. If I did, I'd be a genius. I mean, frankly, if I was a multi-billionaire and I wanted the economy back running, I mean this mostly jokingly, I would go into a black community in Los Angeles and I would pay people to riot.
Yeah.
I mean,
all you have to do is arrest someone like Rodney King style, right? Because from what I hear, most of the minority neighborhoods, they're not doing the stay-at-home crap anyway. They're all out. They're all playing basketball, barbecuing. They're doing their own thing. So I don't know how you get them to riot if they're already not.
Well, I think one of the elements of the perfect storm here is that unfortunately the black community has suffered a greater number of deaths than other demographics, and so therefore they're more likely to, at least philosophically. I mean, the mostly liberals, obviously mostly Democrats, and their community has been hit harder. So they're very unlikely to be a group that's going to go out and protest this at the beginning. Certainly. Now, if this continues on and there's a lot of suffering and they just get so tired of it, then maybe that will change. But I'm looking at I made that assessment mostly facetiously, but from a political standpoint, I think it's an important point. White people are just not going to have any value here as far as protesting. The protests from white people, especially here in California, isn't going to do anything. If anything, it's only going to provoke Governor Newsom to crack down harder. Because, and make no mistake, he picked Orange County beaches to shut down. He was going to shut down all the beaches. Then he just targeted a few beaches in Orange County. Well, why would he do that? Well, because that's the last bash. I mean, even though it's now Democrat, but that's at least a mostly white conservative area. And so he actually wants Orange County to protest against him because it makes him look better, not just in the state, but nationwide. And I'm actually been hesitant to. We have another rally scheduled on Saturday here in Ventura County, and I'm supposed to speak, but I'm very conflicted about the whole thing because I feel very strongly about it. Obviously, I don't know how effective we're going to be, and it's possible we may be counterproductive because of the circumstances that I just outlined. So it is a very frustrating situation. I do not have any good news because I just do not see how we get out of this. It's a perfect storm, especially in an election year. And, because it's an election year, if this wasn't an election year, we might have a chance, but, I'm really baffled by Trump. I keep waiting for him to get his manhood back. And, because it's the only way he gets reelected. I mean, the only way he gets reelected is if he, that was the thing that his supporters loved most about him, and that's gone. And it's the only way that we get back now. And I just don't see it. I just don't see. He looks like a lost man to me. Now, maybe if the data gets a little bit better in the next couple of weeks, he'll feel like he has more leverage. But I'm not sure the data is going to get better. I look at the data way more than I should. I think we're in a weird data spot because we're doing so much testing now. The number of new cases will never go all the way down because we're just finding out about people that had it that we weren't finding out about 7 or 8 weeks ago because we weren't doing nearly as much enough testing. Now we are doing a ton of testing, so those numbers aren't going down, and the deaths are actually 3 to 4 weeks delayed from when people get the virus.
Right.
So we're still getting all these deaths from almost a month ago of when people contracted it. And so in perception, the data looks terrible on both ends. In my opinion, new cases is almost totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
At this point. The only thing that really matter are hospitalizations and deaths. And we already talked about how you might not even be able to rely on deaths. That's another part of this perfect storm. This data is so easily cherry-picked to fit whatever narrative, whatever agenda you want. And that's what the media is going to do. They're going to cherry-pick this data to death to promote their agenda. They're going to sabotage everybody who tries to open up, which, of course, is actually against their own self-interest because when the economy goes to crap, a lot of those news media people are going to lose their jobs. Yeah. But they don't seem to be smart enough to realize that. So anyway, I wish I had better news for you, but I do not see, barring a medical miracle, which could happen. I mean, I have to say, I've been wondering why, never in the history of the world has every super smart person had a massive incentive and no restrictions in trying to come up with a cure for something, right? I mean, you would think with all our technology that we would be able to come up with something in a few months. And I'm not an expert on it. I'm just thinking about this from the standpoint of okay, you've never had this situation before. Every smart mind in the world is incredibly incentivized to come up with something here. You have all the resources you need and no red tape.
Yeah.
I mean, so red tape is usually why we don't get fast medical developments. But there's no red tape now, and so I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't seen. There's been signs of potential developments, but nothing real. And I'm a little bit surprised by that. But barring that, I think we're in big trouble.
Well, on that note,
sorry,
I really do have a little more hope than that right now. I'm seeing a lot more people on Facebook starting to move from we've got to be careful to this is all BS and I'm tired of it. So I'm just really hoping that enough people will continue to look around and still see what
are these moms? Are these moms?
No, these are, well, some of them are, but just, I don't know, people in general. I'm trying to think of what the average age, maybe 40, 45-ish. A lot of singles.
Well, the moms are a key demographic. The moms have got to get tired of this. I would put moms right after minorities. I mean, if I had a wish list, it would be minorities first, especially in key cities. I would wish for them to speak out, and then I would wish for moms, because I've seen a lot of moms are totally invested in this. They're very, very a lot of virtue signaling, and so the moms have to shift. There's a lot of demographic problems. It's not just the Trump non-Trump thing, which is devastating to our side, in my opinion, because that caps us at basically 40%. Because of the Trump thing. But there's an even worse problem. The demographic that would normally be, this is not that big of a deal, we got to tough it out, I've seen a lot in my life, they're all old.
Yeah.
And they're the target of this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of old people who would be, I mean, my mother-in-law is like, this is the craziest thing we've ever done. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die. I don't want to live like this. She's lived through cancer several times. She's had a very difficult life. But there are a lot of people in her demo who are like, well, I don't really want to die right now, and I'm scared. And I understand that. And so it's hitting right at the demographic of people that really ought to be, from a life experience standpoint, on our side, because I mean, they remember World War II, or or at least have stories of World War II. I mean, they've lived through suffering. Kids today are completely spoiled. They have no sense of anything like this, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm very pessimistic. That even there's so many different elements of the demographics that should be on our side that are not, because of the perfect storm element of what this is.
Well, some of them are. I mean, like my mom, she's 72, and she thinks this is all absurd. She says everyone should be, she says, let me stay inside, let all the healthy people go back to work and go and develop herd immunity. And I've seen a few others too that are around her age that are saying the same thing, and they kind of resent being sort of written off. Like, hey, I still think this is stupid too. Well, if I were that age, I would say, I'll take my freaking chances. I'm an adult. Let me make this decision for myself.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope there will be a sea change in the population view of this. But I think it's
that they have to homeschool for the rest of 2020. And I bet you I can get moms out there and protesting, because what I've seen that, idea raised a few times, and the first knee-jerk reaction is, no.
Well, it's funny you say that. My wife is on a mom's Facebook page, which is full of virtue signalers. And apparently one of the local school districts announced today that they might only go to school 2 days a week next year. And apparently the reaction on that Facebook page was, hell no. And this was a group that's very pro shutdown. So, I mean, it's anecdotal, but I think you might be onto something there.
Well, because first of all, homeschooling your kids sucks. If that's not your thing, it's not my thing at all. Secondly, how many of these moms are supposed to be working full time, right? So if you start opening stuff up, you can't then say, okay, everything's open to go to work, but you homeschool your kids too. Really? How is that supposed to work? It doesn't. And frankly, it's been one of the most frustrating periods of my life trying to homeschool my little monsters. And now I know exactly what goes into schooling them. And I don't want, when someone said it might go for the rest of the year, I about lost it. I've had 2 meltdowns during this whole thing, and that was one of them, because you don't do that to me. And I know I would say probably the majority of the moms are going to say the same thing. The kids are not at risk. We all know that. No kids are dying. So the kids need to be at school. And if old people are afraid to go to the school, don't let old people work at the school. It's just
too much common sense.
I know. Well, that's what's been so really, really hard about this, I think, for a lot of us, is that we look at this, we look around, we're like, why is everyone so scared? There's nothing to be afraid of here. And yet just going out to Target now, I hate. Just today, Target has a sign up saying you have to wear the stupid masks because of emergency order. I don't know what that means, but so now, they're opening some stuff up, but you got to put your mask on and stay 6 feet away from everybody. And it's just, I hate the climate of fear. I just can't stand it. It makes me sick. So I'd rather, stay home and not deal with all these panicking people. But
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Well, thank you for at least chatting with me about it. Even I do have hope, but only in the sense that I think that there are more and more of us that are starting to come around to what you and I are thinking. A lot of people hate wearing the masks. A lot of people hate seeing it. You see people out walking with their masks on. I'm like, that's moronic. But I think it's just, again, anecdotal from what I'm seeing, but I'm starting to see more and more people sick of it. And again, we're polarizing, just like the last discussion we had. The country is more polarized now than it was when we had our last talk because of this. And you see it crossing, you see the break right down those party lines. Most people on the right feel like you're stomping all over our freedoms and you're, living in fear. And a lot of people on the left are virtue signaling. You're trying to kill us if you're not wearing your mask. You're trying to kill us if you're trying to open things up. I have a socialist friend on Facebook, and every time I had what I called a herd immunity party at my house last week, and I had my 10 guests because that's what we're allowed, right? And I posted that. I said, this is my herd immunity party. And he's like, well, you let me know if someone gets sick or dies from that. That's the knee-jerk reaction. So, but I'm going to move forward with the confidence that there are more of us starting to get fed up with this, and with summer hitting, especially, that people are going to want to get out and do stuff, and it's going to get really, really tiring really fast not being able to do that. I want to take my kids to the pool. If I can't do that, that's going to royally tick me off. What am I going to do with my kids all summer? So I'm going to bank on that enough.
I hope you're right, Annette.
And enough people are just going to thumb their noses at it and say, what are you going to do, arrest us all?
Well, there's a very good chance I will be arrested before this is all over. I mean, I will be shocked if I'm not arrested in some form. It will be shocking.
Yeah.
I hope not to get shot during that process, but I fully expect to be arrested at some point. Not that I want to be, but I fully.
You have a lawyer on speed dial. All right. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on and chatting with me about this. And you can be found on freespeechbroadcasting.com, at Mediaite, and you have an individual one podcast going right now. You have one on hiatus, and then you have another one you're working on. Where else can you be found right now?
My Twitter feed, which is Zygmunt Freud. Zygmunt Freud.
So Zieg.
Zig. Zygmunt Freud. It's a playoff of Sigmund Freud.
Right.
Only Zygmunt with a Z.
Like you spelled it.
It was a college nickname, and I don't even know why it became my Twitter feed. It was stupid. I didn't even think when I made it, I didn't even think Twitter was going to be a big deal. I was completely wrong about that, and so that's how that stupid.
It's been worse. It could have been like Pokemon 3 or something. All right. Thanks again, and I will check back with you, and hopefully you don't go to jail. But if you do, I'll follow that on Facebook.
All right.
And thanks for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness. Again, go to YouTube /Annette Talks. Like, subscribe, share. Find me on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, etc., etc.